Admiral Thexvar stood on the bridge of the Dominion's edge, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. The blue-green world hung before them like a jewel, unaware that its time had come. Behind him, the greatest fleet in Corvani history stretched across the void, 12,000 warships, each one capable of glassing a continent. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. "All battle groups in position. Admiral." His tactical officer replied, "Planetary defenses are minimal. A few orbital stations, some primitive missile platforms. Nothing that could threaten even our escort vessels." Thexvar nodded. The humans had been observed for decades. They were a young species, barely 3 centuries into their space age. Their technology was crude, their military scattered across dozens of fractured nations. By all calculations, this should be the easiest conquest in the Empire's history. "Open a channel to the planet," he ordered. "Let's give them the standard ultimatum." The communications officer worked at his console. "Channel open, Admiral." Thexvar straightened, assuming the formal posture required for such declarations. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Thexvar of the Corvani Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our domain. You have witnessed our fleet. Resistance is futile. Surrender immediately, and your transition to Imperial rule will be merciful." The transmission cut. Now came the waiting. Most species took between 30 minutes and 2 hours to respond. The smart one capitulated immediately. The foolish ones tried to negotiate. The truly stupid ones actually attempted to fight. Thexvar had conquered 4 to 7 worlds in his career. He knew how this would unfold. 20 minutes later, the communications officer looked up with confusion. "Admiral, we're receiving a response." "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. She was middle-aged, with graying hair and eyes that held no fear, only calculation. Behind her, Thexvar could see what looked like a command center, humans working frantically at various stations. "Admiral Thexvar," she said, her voice steady. "I'm General Sarah Chen, Supreme Commander of Earth's Combined Defense Force. We've received your invitation to surrender." Thexvar waited for the inevitable capitulation. Instead, the human smiled, a cold, predatory expression that reminded him uncomfortably of his own species' war face. "After careful consideration," Chen continued, "Earth's response is simple. Try again." The transmission ended. Thexvar stared at a blank screen, certain he had misheard. What did she say? She said, "Try again, Admiral." A ripple of confused murmurs ran through the bridge crew. In 3,000 years of imperial expansion, no species had ever responded to an ultimatum with such casual dismissal. "Perhaps their translation systems malfunctioned," suggested the communications officer. "Shall I resend the message?" "No," Thexvar said slowly. "They understood perfectly." He turned to his tactical officer. "What exactly are their defensive capabilities?" "As previously reported, Admiral, approximately 200 orbital defense platforms, mostly armed with primitive kinetic weapons. Their fleet consists of maybe 300 ships, none larger than our frigates. Total defensive strength." The officer paused, checking his readings. "Less than 1% of our firepower." Thexvar frowned. Military leaders across the galaxy shared certain traits: pragmatism, tactical awareness, self-preservation. No competent commander would choose certain annihilation over negotiated surrender. Unless, run a deep scan of their system, he ordered. Look for hidden installations, cloaked fleets, anything we might have missed. The next hour passed in tense silence as the fleet sensors probed every corner of the Sol system. They found nothing. No hidden armadas, no secret weapons, no defensive systems beyond what they had already catalogued. "Admiral," the sensor officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. They appear to be powering up everything they have." On the tactical display, Earth's pathetic defenses came online. Orbital stations swiveled to face the Corvani fleet. The human ships, laughably small and primitive, moved into defensive formations. Surface-based weapons platforms tracked their movements. It was like watching children arrange toy soldiers before a hurricane. So, the communications officer said, "We're receiving another transmission from the planet." General Chen reappeared on the screen. This time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood dozens of other humans in various uniforms, different nations, different services, all united in their defiance. "Admiral," Chen said, "I wanted to clarify our position in case there was any misunderstanding. We know exactly how powerful your fleet is. We know exactly how outmatched we are. We know that we cannot win." She paused, letting those words sink in. "And we don't care." Thexvar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. "You see, Admiral, you made a fundamental error about our species. You assume that because we cannot win, we will not fight. But humans have a saying: if you're going to kill us, you will have to do it yourself. We won't make it easy. We won't make it clean. And we sure as hell won't make it quick." The transmission ended again, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Thexvar looked at his officers, seeing his own confusion reflected in their faces. "Prepare the fleet for combat operations," he finally said. "If they want to die gloriously, we'll accommodate them." But as he gave the order, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a disturbing question. What if they knew something he didn't? The first engagement lasted exactly 43 minutes. The Corvani Vanguard, consisting of 300 heavy cruisers, swept toward Earth's outer defenses like an unstoppable tide. Admiral Thexvar watched from the command deck as humanity's pathetic fleet rushed to meet them. "This is almost sad," muttered Commander Zekval, the fleet's tactical coordinator. "They're actually trying to fight." The human ships were crewed by Corvani standards: thick armor plating, primitive weapons, designs that prioritize function over elegance. They moved in tight formations, their smaller vessels clustering around massive, lumbering dreadnoughts that looked more like flying fortresses than warships. "Energy signatures are off the charts," reported the sensor officer. "These ships are running far beyond safe parameters. Their reactors are redlining." Thexvar nodded. Desperation tactics. The humans were pushing their technology past its limits, knowing they had nothing to lose. The fleets met in the space between Mars and Earth. The Corvani ships opened fire first, their particle beams lancing through the void with lethal precision. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. "By the void," breathed Zekval. "They are not trying to preserve their ships. They are using them as weapons." The tactical display showed the impossible truth. When human vessels took critical damage, they didn't retreat or try to save themselves. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the nearest Corvani ship, turning their dying hulks into guided missiles. Their smaller craft swarmed around damaged Corvani vessels like predators, targeting weak points with suicidal precision. "They are ramming us," the tactical officer reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Confirmed ramming attacks on 17 of our ships." Thexvar watched in fascination as a human destroyer, its hull breached an atmosphere venting, slammed into a Corvani cruiser at full speed. The explosion took out both vessels, but it also damaged 2 nearby ships and disrupted the formation. "Sir, the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies," the communications officer said. "Put it through." The bridge filled with human voices, not coordinated commands, but individual messages from ship to ship, captain to captain. Thexvar's translator worked frantically to keep up. "This is Captain Morrison of the Defiant. We're taking heavy damage, but we're not backing down. Yorktown to all ships. We're losing life support, but we're taking 3 of those bastards with us. Remember the Alamo. Remember Thermopylae. Remember every last soul who stood when they should have run." The voices overlapped, creating a chorus of defiance that sent chills down Thexvar's spine. These weren't military transmissions. They were battle cries, death songs, final testaments to something the Admiral didn't understand. "Admiral," Zekval said quietly, "we're winning, but this isn't how conquests usually go." He was right. The Corvani fleet was systematically destroying the human defenders, but it felt wrong. Most species fought to survive, retreating when the odd became impossible, surrendering when defeat was certain. These humans fought like they were already dead, like survival was secondary to something more important. "Status report," Thexvar ordered. "We've eliminated 60% of their fleet," the tactical officer replied. "Our losses are minimal. 23 ships destroyed, 4 to 7 damaged. The humans cannot maintain this pace. But even as he spoke, something changed in the human formation. Their remaining ships began to glow with an eerie light, energy readings spiking beyond anything the Corvani had seen. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, his voice urgent. "I'm detecting massive power buildups in the human vessels. They're overloading their reactors." On the tactical display, the human ships had formed a perfect sphere around a cluster of Corvani vessels. They were no longer trying to fight. They were preparing to die in a very specific way. "All ships, emergency retreat." Thexvar ordered. Too late. The human ships detonated simultaneously. They overloaded reactors, creating a chain reaction that tore through space like a miniature star. The explosion consumed everything within a 10-kilometer radius, human and Corvani alike. When the light faded, 60 human ships were gone. So were 93 Corvani vessels. The bridge fell silent. In the space of 5 minutes, the humans had inflicted more damage on the Corvani fleet than the last 5 conquests combined. Not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through sheer, incomprehensible willingness to die. "Admiral," the communications officer said softly, "we're receiving another transmission from Oath." General Chen appeared on the screen again. Behind her, the command center showed signs of damage, sparks from overloaded systems, personnel treating wounded colleagues. But her expression remained unchanged. "Admiral Thexvar," she said formally, "we hope you found that educational. Our fleet is gone, but I trust you notice the exchange rate. You may have superior technology, but we have something you don't, the absolute certainty that some things are worth dying for." She paused, letting her words sink in. This was just the opening act. Our orbital defenses are still intact, and they are all automated. No human crews to feel fear, no commanders to make the rational choice to surrender. They'll keep fighting until every last platform is destroyed. After that, you'll have to come down to the planet itself. Her smile was cold, predatory. "We have 7 billion people down here. Admiral, how many ships do you have?" The transmission ended, leaving Thexvar staring at the tactical display. His fleet had been reduced by less than 10%, but for the first time in his career, victory felt uncertain. "Prepare the second wave," he ordered, "and double the escort formations. These humans fight like nothing we've encountered before." As his officers carried out his orders, Thexvar found himself wondering what kind of species chose death over surrender, and more importantly, what that choice might cost him before this was over. The orbital defenses were a nightmare of mathematics and madness. Admiral Thexvar watched from the bridge as his fleet approached Earth's defensive grid. 200 platforms arranged in a perfect sphere around the planet, each one tracking his ships with mechanical precision. "These aren't ordinary defense platforms," reported his tactical officer. "They're learning, adapting their firing patterns based on our movements." Thexvar studied the tactical display. The human weapons were primitive, railguns, missile launchers, basic particle beams. But they were positioned with devastating effectiveness, creating overlapping fields of fire that would make any approach costly. "Begin the assault," he ordered. "All battle groups, advance in formation Delta 7. The Corvani fleet moved forward like a living thing, ships flowing around each other in practice formations. They had done this thousands of times before. Systematic destruction of planetary defenses, followed by orbital bombardment and ground invasion. But these humans had one more surprise waiting. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out. "The platforms they're moving." Thexvar stared at the display in disbelief. The orbital platforms were breaking formation, repositioning themselves with the aid of hidden thruster arrays. They weren't just weapons. They were mobile weapons, capable of adapting their positions in real time. "So, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. They appear to be powering the platforms remotely." The truth hit him like a physical blow. The humans had turned their entire planet into a weapons platform. Every power plant, every reactor, every energy source was feeding into their orbital defense grid. They were literally burning their civilization to fuel their defiance. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Thexvar ordered. The platforms opened fire simultaneously. The space around Earth erupted in a storm of projectiles and energy beams. The human weapons were individually weak, but there were so many of them, firing with such coordinated precision, that the combined effect was devastating. "We're taking heavy casualties," reported Commander Zekval. "The platforms are targeting our weakest ships first, trying to break our formation." Thexvar watched as his fleet's carefully maintained order dissolved into chaos. The humans weren't just fighting. They were thinking, adapting, learning from each exchange. Their primitive computers were analyzing Corvani tactics in real time, adjusting their strategies with inhuman speed. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from a planet," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." General Chen's image filled the screen. She was in a different location now, what appeared to be a bunker deep underground. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows on her face, but her expression remained determined. "Admiral," she said, "I wanted to give you a brief lesson in human history. 3,000 years ago, a small city-state called Sparta faced an invasion by the Persian Empire. The Persians had 1,000,000 soldiers. The Spartans had 300. On the tactical display, another wave of Corvani ships died in the crossfire of the orbital platforms. "The Spartans lost," Chen continued. "They all died, but they held the pass for 3 days, and in doing so, they gave the rest of Greece time to prepare. The Persians eventually lost a war, not because they were weak, but because they didn't understand what they were fighting." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "You're making the same mistake. Admiral, you think this is about military superiority. It's not. It's about what happens when you push a species to the point where death becomes preferable to surrender." The transmission flickered, and suddenly Chen wasn't alone. The screen split into dozens of smaller windows, showing faces from across the globe, military officers, government leaders, ordinary citizens in shelters and bunkers. "We're not just fighting you with ships and weapons," Chen said. "We're fighting you with everything we have. Every man, woman, and child on this planet has made the same choice. We'd rather die free than live as slaves." One by one, the faces on the screen began to speak. "This is President Martinez of the American Federation. We stand with Earth. Prime Minister Okafor of the African Union. We will not yield. Chancellor Petrov of the Russian Confederation. Death before Dishna. Premier Li of the Chinese Republic. We fight as one." The voices multiplied, creating a chorus of defiance that seemed to fill the entire bridge. Thexvar found himself stepping backward, overwhelmed by the sheer force of their collective will. "You see, Admiral," Chen said as the other voices faded, "you're not fighting an army. You're fighting an idea. And ideas are much harder to kill than ships." The transmission ended just as a tactical officer called out, "Admiral, we destroyed 60% of their platforms, but our losses are severe. We've lost over 800 ships." Thexvar stared at the numbers in disbelief. 800 ships, against a species that hadn't even achieved faster-than-light travel. It was impossible, but it was happening. "So," Zekval said quietly, "perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. We could negotiate, offer them favorable terms for surrender." "No," Thexvar said firmly. "We've come too far to turn back now. Besides, you've seen how they respond to reasonable offers." He turned to the tactical display, studying the remaining human defenses. The platforms were still firing, but their rate had decreased. They were running out of power, burning through their planet's energy reserves at an unsustainable rate. "They can't maintain this forever," he said. "Their planet is dying to fuel their defiance. Eventually, they'll have to choose between fighting us and preserving their civilization." But even as he spoke, Thexvar wondered if he understood humans at all. They had already chosen death over surrender twice. What made him think they would change their minds now? On the tactical display, the last orbital platform exploded in a burst of light. The way to Earth was clear, but somehow victory felt more distant than ever. "Prepare for planetary assault," Thexvar ordered, "and may the void help us all." The surface of Earth was a fortress. Admiral Thexvar studied the intelligence reports as his fleet prepared for the final assault, and what he saw defied military logic. The humans had turned their entire planet into a weapon. Cities had been fortified beyond recognition, reported his intelligence officer. Every building has been converted into a strong point. They flooded underground tunnels, created kill zones in open areas, and positioned weapons on every rooftop. Thexvar nodded grimly. What about civilian populations? That's difficult to determine, sir. Our sensors detect massive populations in underground shelters, but they're not just hiding. They're actively supporting the defense effort. Children as young as 10 are serving as ammunition runners. Elderly citizens are operating communication networks. The Admiral felt a chill run down his spine. The entire species is at war. It appears so, sir. We estimate that 90% of Earth's population is directly involved in the defense effort. The remaining 10% are too young, too old, or too injured to fight. Thexvar turned to the tactical display, where it hung like a blue-green jewel surrounded by the debris of 2 epic battles. His fleet had been reduced to fewer than 10,000 ships, but it was still overwhelming force by any reasonable standard. Begin the landings, he ordered. All assault groups initiate planetary invasion protocols. The first wave of landing craft launched from the fleet's carriers, streaking toward Earth's surface like falling stars. Thexvar watched through the optical feeds as they approached major population centers: New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing. Then the real war began. The humans had prepared for this moment with terrifying thoroughness. Every landing zone was a trap, every approach route a killing field. The Corvani forces found themselves fighting not just military units, but entire populations mobilized for war. So, the communications officer called out, "We're receiving reports from all landing zones. The humans they're using unconventional tactics." Define unconventional. Civilian vehicles loaded with explosives, suicide attacks by individuals and small groups, chemical weapons deployed in urban areas. They are not following any recognized rules of warfare. Thexvar watched the tactical feeds in growing horror. A group of human children, none older than 15, had just destroyed a Corvani armored unit with improvised explosives. An elderly woman had detonated a hidden bomb, taking out an entire squad of soldiers. A businessman in a suit had charged a Corvani position with nothing but a knife and a prayer. "They are not fighting like soldiers," he said quietly. "They are fighting like something I've never seen before." "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet," the communications officer announced. General Chen appeared on the screen one final time. She was in a different location, what appeared to be a bombed-out building. Her uniform was torn, her face was streaked with dirt and blood, but her eyes still blazed with defiance. "Admiral Thexvar," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I wanted to give you one last chance to understand what you're dealing with. You've seen our ships die. You've seen our defenses fall. You've seen our cities burn. And through it all, we've kept fighting." She gestured to the ruins around her. "This is what's left of New York City. Your forces control maybe 10% of it. The rest belongs to us, ordinary people who decided that some things are worth dying for." The camera panned to show the scene behind her. Humans of all ages were working frantically, building barricades, treating wounded, preparing weapons. Children were carrying supplies to adult fighters. Elderly citizens were operating communication equipment. Everyone was involved. Everyone was fighting. "You conquered other species because they were rational," Chen continued. "They calculated the odds, weighed the costs, and chose survival over principle. But humans aren't rational, Admiral. We're stubborn, angry, and absolutely convinced that freedom is worth any price." She smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't cold or predatory. It was sad, almost gentle. "Do you know what we call someone who fights against impossible odds, knowing they'll lose? We call them heroes. And right now, every person on this planet is a hero." The transmission flickered, and suddenly Chen was joined by dozens of other faces: soldiers, civilians, leaders, children, all of them showing the same expression of determined defiance. "We're not asking you to leave," Chen said. "We know you won't. We're not asking you to show mercy. We know you can't. We're just telling you that this is who we are. This is what you chose to fight." One by one, the faces on the screen began to speak. "This is Captain Rodriguez, fighting in the ruins of Mexico City. We outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but we're still here." Lieutenant Kim, Seoul Defense Force. They've taken the city, but they haven't taken our spirit. This is Maria Santos, age 14, fighting in the tunnels under Sao Paulo. My parents are dead, but I'm still fighting. Dr. Patel, Mumbai Medical Corps. We're treating the wounded and preparing for the next wave. The voices multiplied, creating a symphony of defiance that seemed to fill the entire universe. Thexvar found himself transfixed, unable to look away from the faces of a species that had chosen death over surrender. You see, Admiral, Chen said as the other voices faded, you're not just fighting Earth. You're fighting the human spirit. And that's something you can't kill with ships or weapons. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. So, the tactical officer said quietly, our ground forces report that they are making progress, but casualties are extreme. For every kilometer of ground we take, we lose hundreds of soldiers. Thexvar nodded slowly. How long until the planet is secured? At current rates, years, sir, maybe decades. And that's assuming they don't develop new tactics or weapons. The Admiral stared at the tactical display, trying to process what he was seeing. His fleet had been reduced to less than half its original strength. His ground forces were bogged down in brutal urban warfare. His entire invasion was turning into a meat grinder. And for the first time in his career, Admiral Thexvar began to wonder if victory was worth the cost. The message came 3 months later, when Admiral Thexvar's fleet had been reduced to 6,000 ships and his ground forces controlled barely 30% of Earth's surface. It wasn't transmitted through normal channels. It simply appeared on every screen, every display, every communication device in the Corvani fleet simultaneously. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez, commanding the Terran Expeditionary Force. Thexvar stared at the screen in disbelief. The woman speaking was clearly human, but she was wearing a uniform he didn't recognize, sleek, advanced, bearing insignia that seemed to shift and change as he watched. You're probably wondering how I'm talking to you right now, Vasquez continued. The answer is simple. While you've been fighting for every street corner on Earth, we've been building something you didn't think was possible. Behind her, the background revealed the truth. She was standing on the bridge of a ship, but not the primitive vessels Earth had fielded months ago. This was something else entirely, sleek and advanced, with technology that seemed to bend light around its edges. You see, Admiral Thexvar, you made a critical error in your assessment of humanity. You thought we were a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. You were wrong. The image shifted, showing a vast construction facility hidden on the far side of Earth's moon. Massive ships were being assembled there, not the crude vessels that had died in the first battle, but something far more advanced. We've been in space for 3 centuries, Vasquez said, but we've been preparing for this moment for the last 50 years. Every human colony, every space station, every mining operation in the outer system has been working toward one goal, building a fleet that could defend Earth when the time came. Thexvar felt his blood turn to ice. That's impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such a massive construction project. As if hearing his thoughts, Vasquez smiled. Your intelligence networks detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. A primitive species, barely capable of interplanetary travel, certainly no threat to the mighty Corvani Empire. The image shifted again, showing a star chart of the local solar system. Red dots appeared, marking positions throughout the outer planets and asteroid belt. There were hundreds of them. While you've been fighting the population of one planet, Vasquez continued, we've been mobilizing the resources of an entire solar system. Every human colony, every space habitat, every mining station has been contributing to the war effort. The tactical display on Thexvar's bridge erupted in alarms. Enemy contact were appearing throughout the solar system, not just a few ships, but entire fleets. The sensor readings were impossible, showing technology that exceeded even Corvani capabilities. So, his tactical officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm detecting over 15,000 ships. They're surrounding us. Thexvar looked at the tactical display in horror. The human fleet was arranged in a perfect sphere around Earth, with his own forces trapped at the center. But these weren't the primitive vessels he had been fighting. These ships were sleek, advanced, crackling with energy that his senses couldn't fully analyze. How? he breathed. Vasquez seemed to hear him. 50 years ago, we detected your surveillance probes. We knew you were coming, and we knew exactly what you would see when you looked at us. So we gave you what you expected, a primitive, divided species that posed no threat to your expansion. The image behind her shifted one final time, showing Earth itself. But now Thexvar could see the truth. The planet wasn't dying from the energy drain of the orbital defenses. It was powering something far more significant, a massive space-based infrastructure that had been hidden from his senses. Every battle you fought, every ship you destroyed, every city you've occupied, it was all a delaying action. We were buying time for our real fleet to get into position. Thexvar felt a terrible understanding wash over him. The civilians, the desperate defense. It was all real, Vasquez said firmly. Every person who died fighting you chose to make that sacrifice. Every ship that rammed your forces did so willingly. Every soldier who stood against impossible odds believed in what they were fighting for. We never lied to our own people about the cost of resistance. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we also never told you the whole truth about what you were fighting. You thought you were conquering a primitive world. You were actually attacking the home system of a species that has been preparing for war for half a century. The communication shifted, and suddenly Thexvar was looking at General Chen again. But she wasn't in a bombed-out building. She was standing in what appeared to be a command center more advanced than anything in the Corvani fleet. "Admiral," Chen said, "I told you that humans aren't rational. I was wrong. We're absolutely rational. We just operate on a longer timeline than you do." She gestured to the displays around her, showing the true scope of humanity's preparations. "We knew that someone like you would come eventually. We knew that a young species would be seen as easy prey. So we prepared for that day, while making sure you would never see it coming." The tactical display showed the human fleet beginning to move. 15,000 ships, all more advanced than anything the Corvani had faced, closing in on his position. "You have a choice, Admiral," Vasquez said. "You can fight us, and we'll destroy every ship in your fleet. Or you can do what we've been trying to tell you from the beginning." Thexvar looked at his remaining forces, 6,000 ships, battle-damaged and depleted, facing an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1 with superior technology. "What choice?" he asked. General Chen smiled. "Try again." The human fleet stopped just outside weapons range, weapons powered but not yet firing, waiting. For the first time in his career, Admiral Thexvar gave the order he had never imagined he would give. "All ships, prepare for immediate withdrawal. We're leaving." As his fleet began its retreat, Thexvar couldn't help but admire the tactical brilliance of what he had just experienced. The humans had turned their greatest weakness, being seen as primitive, into their greatest strength. They had sacrificed thousands of lives to maintain the deception, all while preparing for the moment when they would reveal their true capabilities. "So," his communications officer said, "we're receiving one final transmission from Oath." General Chen appeared on the screen one last time. Behind her, the ruins of New York City were already being rebuilt, but with technology that seemed decades ahead of what they had shown before. "Admiral Thexvar," she said, "I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you came here expecting to find a primitive species that would kneel before your superior force. Instead, you found a species willing to die for their freedom, and smart enough to make sure they didn't have to." She paused, her expression becoming serious. "Take word back to your empire. Tell them that Earth is not available for conquest. Tell them that humanity is not a species to be underestimated. And tell them that if they ever come here again, they won't face a delaying action." Her smile returned, cold and predatory. "They'll face a war." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Thexvar alone with the greatest military defeat in Corvani history. As his fleet retreated from the Sol system, he found himself wondering if the Empire would learn from this lesson, or if they would simply send a larger fleet. He hoped, for both their sakes, that they would choose wisdom over pride. Behind them, Earth continued to spin peacefully in space, its blue-green surface showing no signs of deception that had just played out. But now Thexvar knew the truth. Humanity wasn't just another species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors,